My brother took everything I built with such a brazen smile as if I'd handed it to him myself. He thought he was the winner now, the king, the family favorite. But in our world, where flattery and lies rule, everything can turn upside down with just one wrong move. So buckle up, it's about to get intense. My name is Nick, I'm 26, and I built my business from scratch. Everything was going great until my golden brother, Alan, who's 28, decided he was entitled to what I had. I'm the guy who started with nothing and worked my way up. A business I devoted years to while others partied or binged on TV shows. I had it all. Talent, brains, and yes, plenty of grit. And now this guy, my older brother Alan, thinks he can just step in and take it. Because why not, right? Since childhood, Alan has been the golden boy of the family. All he had to do was smile or pull off a clever trick, and my parents would worship him. If he managed to scrape a pass on an exam, it was celebrated like a triumph worthy of reward. When I won competitions, they barely noticed, but let Alan do something half-decent, and he'd be crowned king no less. "Well done, Alan. You're so talented, Alan." You get the idea. But Alan's life had one little catch. He's a master manipulator, and to be honest, he's honed this skill to a professional level. Gossip, scheming, it's all routine for him, like his morning coffee. He's wrecked more than one family bond, controlled friends, all in the name of personal gain. And now, this charmer has set his sights on my business. He started creeping closer from a distance, like a small shark scenting blood in the water. At first, he was overly nice, even pretending to support my efforts, though I never needed his support. Alan has a taste for risk, especially when it involves other people's money. He had already blown through his trust fund on questionable investments and luxury toys, but now he was out of funds. So, guess what? He decided my business was his new ticket back into the game. At first, I thought I was imagining it. This was too brazen, even for him. He began hosting dinners with our parents, going to clubs, the theater. You know, classic moves people make to butter someone up. Classic Alan. A bit of over-the-top kindness, and he was already cozying up to our mom's heart. And of course, with sly comments that maybe Nick was rushing things with his business, that the risks were too high, and that he, Alan, knew best how things should work. Ridiculous, right? My parents, who'd been mostly on the sidelines, started giving me these faintly skeptical looks, as if I were a kid not quite ready for the adult world. Oh, and Alan knew how to add fuel to the fire of their doubts. What started as a simple suggestion about being cautious soon had them looking at me as if my business was a powder keg. It got to the point where I expected them to start checking up on me. Alan enjoyed this. He'd casually mentioned to Mom and Dad that maybe I was not as reliable as I seemed. Just a simple phrase, but it had a chain reaction. The more he repeated his insinuations, the more my parents began questioning my competence. They listened to him, and he spun his web skillfully. This guy is a real manipulator, and I could feel he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Remember how I said my parents started watching me like I was some kind of shady character with questionable business methods? Well, that was just the warm-up. Every conversation with them turned into a debriefing where, apparently, I had to justify every move I made. Mom was constantly asking, "Nick, are you sure you should be spending that much on employees? Or maybe you should set aside part of the profits just in case things go south?" Oh, right, because what? My business is a casino, and I'm about to gamble everything away on imaginary risks? Sure, Mom. Sounds totally legit. Of course, Alan saw all this and realized the stars had aligned in his favor. He was waiting for the right moment, and I've got to admit, he picked it perfectly. My parents were already almost convinced I was somehow steering the business in the wrong direction, so Alan decided it was time to roll out his brilliant strategy. And guess how he presented it? Smoothly, like a professional manipulator. "Mom, Dad," he said over dinner, "have you ever thought that Nick might be getting a little too carried away with his business ideas? The risks are so high right now. His company, I don't want to say anything bad, but it could literally collapse." Naturally, my parents tensed up, as if they'd just heard a prediction of the apocalypse. Alan kept going, adding, "Actually, I have an idea that might help save the situation if things start going downhill. I just want to help Nick. Honestly, I'm just worried about him and about our future." Of course, they fell for it. Worried about me. Exactly what they wanted to hear. After that, everything went according to his plan. They pressured me with questions and even suggested I share control of the company with Alan. But let's be honest, share was just a polite term. They made it very clear that they didn't trust my methods anymore. Alan seized this opportunity like a hungry shark going for fresh bait, and as soon as he got control, his concerned brother mask fell right off. He started restructuring, or as he called it, optimizing. Personally, I'd call it destroying everything I built. He rebranded, leaving nothing but a shell of what I'd created. But that was just the beginning. He started firing employees, the very ones I'd handpicked so carefully, like I was putting together a team for a Mars mission. And you know how he explained it? Cutting costs to increase profits. Yeah, right, of course. My company, which I'd created as a place for innovation, ideas, and talent, was literally turning into a cold money-making machine. Dreams of new products or services? Forget about it. All Alan cared about was cutting expenses to squeeze out every possible cent. He was so ruthlessly efficient about it that I started to wonder if he had any soul left at all. But the worst part? There was nothing I could do about it. I was, in a sense, standing on the sidelines, watching my hard work turn into a corporate nightmare. And Alan was loving it. Oh yeah, he was getting a real kick out of doing everything his way, and he didn't even hide it. Just the other day, he even said to me, "You know, Nick, your company really needed a firm hand." Thank you, Captain Obvious. So, what happens when someone who has no clue how to run a business starts making cash while losing touch with reality? That's right, you get a show called Everything's Sinking, but I don't believe it. Alan, this business tycoon, dove in so clumsily that even his most loyal clients started fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. And you know what the funniest part is? Alan genuinely believed it wasn't his fault. Contract after contract was broken, and clients left without a second thought. But Alan kept up the act as if everything was under control. He literally yelled at the staff, as if it was their fault that his brilliant ideas were falling flat. "You just don't understand the vision," he'd say, as if his vision wasn't one big disaster. I couldn't believe he actually saw himself as some kind of genius. But he did. Meanwhile, I quietly worked on rebuilding my reputation. You know what they say? The best way to avoid falling off a cliff is to stop dancing on the edge. That's exactly what I was doing. I called up former clients, assuring them that there was still hope, that the original company, the one I'd built from scratch, might still return. These conversations always started with complaints and sarcastic sighs, but ended with clients trusting me. They knew that if they stayed with Alan, they were headed straight for disaster. And I told them honestly, "Give me some time, and I'll get it all back on track." At the same time, surprisingly enough, Alan was digging the company's grave even deeper. He started signing contracts without the funds to back them up, hoping he'd strike it big. He seemed to believe that luck would always be on his side, the classic mindset of someone who's never earned a single cent on his own. He began hiding the real numbers from investors, barely keeping them in the game by promising them the moon. "Oh yeah, sure, we're on track," he'd say with a smile, as if he actually believed in his own nonsense. But that whole fake facade started to crack. The more he lied, the faster the debts piled up. And I watched as he dug himself deeper and deeper into a hole, with no way out. Every time I saw him in the office, he looked like a man chasing a departing train. And I just sat back and smiled, knowing that any moment now, the train would be gone for good. For some unfathomable reason, my parents still believed in his so-called talents. They kept admiring his supposed dedication, as if ignoring every piece of evidence right in front of them. "He's working so hard for the family," my mom would sigh, looking at him with pride. Oh, if only they knew that behind those efforts lay complete financial ruin. So the show goes on. Alan is desperate, making even crazier bets as if he's trying to win the lottery, while I'm just waiting in the wings. Because the faster he sinks, the closer I am to making my comeback. And then the day finally came when Alan completely lost it. The company was on the brink, and everyone, literally everyone, knew that his brilliant leadership had turned into a disaster. He tried to keep things under control, but the moment one investor realized how bad things were, it triggered a chain reaction. The others began to panic and withdraw as well. Within a week, the lawsuits started rolling in. Not one or two, but in stacks, like overdue utility bills. Alan, of course, scrambled to get out, but it was the end. Then came the moment. The company was broke, the clients were furious, and the investors wanted their money back. Alan was left alone, with zero cash flow and a reputation comparable to a stain on a white suit. While he was running around, grasping at straws, I rose from my chair with the feeling of a victor. It's my time to shine, I thought, confident that from now on, everything would go according to my plan. I picked up the phone and started calling my old clients. "Remember how things were when I was in charge?" I'd say, with a touch of confidence. And of course, they remembered. They missed the days when their contracts were handled by a professional, not by a guy who was practically trying to sell the company on eBay. One by one they came back, with encouraging words and, most importantly, signed contracts. When Alan realized it was all over, that he was no longer the king of business, and that his reputation was worth less than dust, he, believe it or not, came to me for help. It was like a scene from a movie. "Nick, I was wrong. I made mistakes. Can you help me get out of this?" He had this pathetic look on his face, like he was not just admitting defeat, but apologizing to the whole universe. My response was simple. I just smiled, a cold, distant smile, and said, "You know, Alan, you had a chance to walk away without destroying what I built. But you decided to take everything from me, didn't you?" He looked at me as if he'd just heard his sentence. And yes, it was his sentence. Unlike him, I wasn't about to save someone who tried to ruin me for his own gain. Even my parents finally saw the real picture. Mom was shocked, and Dad stared in silence, realizing he'd supported Alan all these years for nothing. Their perfect image of their golden son had crumbled. But you know what? I didn't care anymore. There was no satisfaction in their late revelation. I was already past that. With a team and my best clients at my side, I started rebuilding the company. New contracts, a rebranded image, and values that had once been the foundation of my business. Everything fell back into place. And Alan? He was left with nothing. Debts, a destroyed reputation, and no prospects whatsoever.